Welcome everybody to episode number 8 of podcast. I'm going to be joined here today with Dan Artaev of Artaev at Law, founder and managing partner of this law firm based out of Metro Detroit area, Michigan. He handles a bunch of business disputes, but among that coined himself as sort of a FreightGuard lawyer. So let's get into it today. What's going on, Dan?
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course, man. Anytime. I mean, FreightGuard lawyer is an interesting statement, so I'm looking forward to the show today.
Well, yeah, it seems to be right on topic for a lot of stuff that you talk about on your podcast and on LinkedIn is directly related to freight guards, and I do work with a lot of carriers who are trying to resolve those.
Yeah, of course. I mean, freight guards can definitely cripple, a carrier. I'm sure you've seen that firsthand. And I mean, I think we've all sort of thought about the lawyer topic when it comes to freight guards, but not
Yeah,
many of us have even got to talk to a lawyer about this. So I'm, interested to hear what you have to say about it.
yeah,
But
yes. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, I mean, if you want to just give us a quick rundown of, what you do, what your law firm's about, and sort of how you came across freight guard report law work of sorts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Alex. So I'm the founder and managing partner of Artaev at Law, based right outside of Detroit. Um, and my specialization is business law, and I just have a special interest in anything to do with emerging technologies, the internet. And a few years ago, I was reading a couple of different articles about damaging statements online and false statements online. And incidentally, I came across this article that had to do with a freight guard, and I decided to write an article about it. It involved a couple of brokers, or a broker and a carrier here in Michigan. They got into a dispute. Broker posted a freight guard. The freight guard made a bunch of false and damaging statements about the carrier. The carrier filed a lawsuit. It was called, I think, Penguin Trucking. It was in the news. And what really got my attention is the fact that the carrier was able to secure a multi-$100,000 judgment against the broker just for these statements, and business reputation damages. So I thought it was an interesting topic. I wrote an article about it, and incidentally, I somehow got into the top 5 or so Google search results on this topic, and I had a number of carriers starting to contact me, all with similar stories, and asking for what they can and can't do and what I can do to help them resolve the particular freight guard.
Yeah, so I mean, you just kind of came across a story, dipped your toes in it out of, some curiosity, and you just started ending up being, the face of being a freight guard lawyer.
Sort of like that, yeah. But I really enjoy working with carriers. A lot of them are just very hardworking self-starter individuals, and I really admire that. And a lot of them are also immigrants, and English might not be their first language. So I definitely enjoy helping them kind of figure out the legal system over here and stand up for their rights.
Yeah, I mean, I think the topic is interesting because I'm sure you've come across that a lot of freight guard reports, they hold a lot of weight and they do a lot of damage. And like you've seen, sometimes they're false statements from the broker. And I guess that's where the case becomes easy for you to prove what is fact and what is, just kind of like an emotional statement.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a very important distinction with any statement, and especially in freight guards. What is essentially a false statement of fact, which is definitely something you can file a lawsuit over and get damages for, or maybe there's a freight guard with something that's true, and you can't get a lawsuit for that. Or maybe there's a freight guard with what is characterized as a statement of opinion, like this carrier has a really bad driver. Well, that can be the carrier's opinion, and opinions are generally not something that you can file a defamation suit over.
Yeah.
You were looking kind of for statements like this carrier is a double broker. Well, that you can prove that whether that's true or false. And, such statements are especially damaging for carriers in the industry.
Yeah, I mean the whole fraud and double broker FreightGuard reports are definitely held at a much more serious tone and consequence when it comes to the reports. So I mean, when a carrier comes to you and says, "Hey, Dan, I got a FreightGuard. Oh, I don't know what to do about it." What's kind of the first step that goes into this, like into this process?
Well, again, the first step is to really find out what happened here and really dig into what the FreightGuard says, where the FreightGuard is accurate, where the FreightGuard is inaccurate. And then so when I get the broker or the carrier side of the story, rather, I also ask the carrier to provide me with as much supporting documentation as I can, just to verify that this is a case that we can pursue further. Because again, as a law firm, I like to have a solid defamation case before I do anything further, or at least something that's, we can bring and argue in good faith.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can't. I'm sure people have come to you with their FreightGuard reports, and you've read them and just said, "Yeah, you know what? Like, all of this is true. I'm sorry, I can't help you with any of this. You made a mistake."
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a misconception that sometimes people come to me with, is that just the fact that a review is negative online or FreightGuard is negative about your business doesn't make it illegal. It actually
Yeah.
has to be false and provably so. And so when somebody comes to me with a FreightGuard and the FreightGuard says this carrier hires inexperienced drivers and I'll never use them again, it might be a bad review, it might be damaging to your business, but that's not really something that I can really pursue from a legal angle. And again, like I said, I like to first of all vet the case to see that it's provable.
No, of course. I mean, I think you kind of look at the topic, from a law perspective, where it's like defamation, words like defamation and slander, come
Right.
up a lot. And I think that the average person working in logistics doesn't really look at FreightGuard reports with that type of wording behind it, because we kind of look at them and just say, "Hey, this isn't true," or "Hey, this is kind of a matter of opinion more so than a matter of fact." But when you're looking at it from the law perspective, I mean, defamation, slander, like these are very serious, terms, and they are exactly what's happening when the FreightGuard isn't legitimate, to say in the simplest terms.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Carrier 411 and the FreightGuard model that they use is they allow brokers to use these tags like unethical business practices and fraudulent conduct. And so a lot of brokers will just slap those tags on without really thinking about what they mean. And a lot of the time I can look at those and I can, if I'm approaching a broker on behalf of a carrier, I can say, look, you're accusing them of fraudulent conduct, but there's no fraud here. Just because they screwed up your load, that doesn't mean they're fraudulent or unethical, or they dropped it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're fraudulent. Fraud has a very specific meaning. So
Yeah, I
I
mean, I
think
think the
that
whole FreightGuard report system, when it was created and what it was created for, was, the idea was good, and it was something that the industry needed. But I think we've kind of came, especially with how down the market's been the past, I'd say 2 years. I think there's been a lot of room for abuse with the Carrier 411 system and FreightGuard report system in general, just because,
right.
everybody's on edge. It's a lot of tensions in the industry. And I think that there's a lot of people that just don't understand or grasp the gravity of what they're doing to a business when they do file a freight guard. And I think that the freight guard should be used, when things like are unexcusable. Somebody steals a load, somebody holds it hostage, somebody threatens somebody like physically, something like this. And I think the driver being an hour late or the driver having a breakdown an hour before a pickup is just not what it was created for.
Absolutely. And I've even seen situations where brokers go out and threaten carriers with freight guards. I'm
Yep.
going to freight guard you if you don't do this. If you don't change your rate, I'm going to freight guard you.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I had it happen to me about a month or two ago
oh
where I
yeah.
got into a dispute with a broker and they told me, "Hey, if you don't like let this go and you don't take the short pay, we're gonna give you a freight guard." I was like, "Man, like this isn't what it was designed for," and it's like blackmail at that point.
That's exactly it, and that's a whole separate topic.
Whole
Black.
separate topic. Let's not get into the blackmail route,
No,
but
let's not talk about that today. But I think it's very important for brokers to realize how serious and what kind of consequences a freight guard report has for a carrier. And I think when they get a letter from an attorney, cease and desist is what I do a lot of the time. It's the gravity of the situation sort of hits them, and that's why I think it's particularly effective to engage an attorney who knows what these freight guards are, knows the carrier and trucking business, and like I have a strategy to get this stuff in front of the broker and to maximize the chances of resolution.
yeah, I mean, I think it's just funny because I'm sure whoever's watching this has probably never been on the receiving end of an actual attorney who's trying to fight a freight guard that they've placed. And I mean, that's why I think this is such an interesting show because we've all heard the idea of someone hiring a lawyer to fight a freight guard, but none of us, I don't think, have firsthand experience in getting a cease and desist letter, in getting a defamation letter for a freight guard. So, I mean, what are some common things that carriers come to you with? Some common like situations that you would be willing to kind of defend?
Well, again, anytime that there's the freight guard issue and the carrier can come to me and say, this is false because XYZ, here's the proof. And so for example, I can give you a couple of real world examples. Um, Most recently, I had a carrier come to me, and they did a load for a broker back in May. Carried a load of refrigerated goods to Costco, dropped it off, no problem. Sent their invoice to the broker, no problem. Everything was all good. Broker was just really slow in paying, and carrier kept asking, "Where's my check? Where's my check?" Uh, Carrier got frustrated, went after their bond, engaged a couple of collection firms, started to give a headache to the broker. All of a sudden, broker hits him with a freight guard and says, "This load was delivered with temperature abuse, and they're fraudulent." And so I approached the broker on behalf of this carrier with proof, including the bill of lading that said there's no
Yeah,
issue
no
with delivery.
damages here, no
No,
issues, clean delivery.
I got an email from Costco that says no issues, no temperature abuse here. And I said, "You're just avoiding paying him, aren't you?" And money was transferred soon thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of
So
course. When you can go
that's
after, the delivery, get clean bills, proof that this statement is false. I mean, at that point, it just falls
yeah.
apart
So
for
I
him.
mean, it was a situation where there was a legitimate dispute and overpayment, and then the broker got mad and decided to freight guard the carrier for just annoying them.
Yeah, I mean,
So
that's the thing. Those emotional freight guards is kind of what's the
yeah,
issue, when it comes down to these things, because like if there's a reason for the freight guard and if it was like completely deserved, then it is what it is for the carrier. But in a situation like that where the broker is trying to say, hey, there was issues on this delivery, the product was damaged, and then you make a phone call to the receiver and the receiver tells you, I've never heard about this, it delivered clean, clean bills. It just
yeah,
makes you think like, those people, because from the minute a freight guard goes live, the carrier will start to lose money, depending on how well connected they are with personal, connections and brokers and stuff. It might be less of an impact rather than, somebody smaller who relies heavily on the spot market. But from the minute that freight guard goes live, the carrier will start losing money. So, I mean, in these cases, like for that case, an example, do you like get damages back from the broker in that situation? And how does that kind of look?
So it really depends on what the carrier's goal is. And I'd say 90% of the time, my client's primary concern is just get that freight
Just
guard
remove that freight guard, yeah.
And if it comes down soon after I contact them, usually they're more than willing to just say, okay, let's just go our separate ways. We will never load with you again, and you never load us again. But if it escalates beyond the negotiation and the cease and desist efforts and has to go to litigation, then absolutely the carrier will seek damages for things like lost business, lost loads that they got rejected from because of the freight guard, and they'll seek damages.
I think it's just kind of funny because like adults would handle the situation exactly how you said. Just put me on do not use, I'll put you on do not use, we'll just go our separate ways, you know? I mean, I think that's how the situation should be handled. If something's happened, you know, where the broker's not going to use the carrier in the future, or if the carrier feels like they're not going to use the broker in the future, I feel like there's no need to go out with the social media and the Google reviews and the freight guards. I feel like there's just some mutual conversation where you can both agree, like, hey, you know, you guys can just throw me on your blacklist, I'll throw you on my blacklist, and you know, we'll just kind of part ways. But I think that's where the emotion comes into it, because I think people are very emotional, especially in freight, and they just can't let things go. You know, it's that everybody wants that next step of escalation. But I mean, what else? What else have you come across? What other situations? So
I've had a couple situations where there was an erroneous tag for double brokering, where something, you know, carriers, not like you mentioned, some of them are smaller, some of them are not as well organized. Sometimes they'll be running two separate businesses from the same email, like a carrier business and a dispatch business. I've seen that. And so then a broker sees a carrier with a different MC number and the dispatch was associated with the same email with a different MC number. They make an assumption that there's double brokering going on, go in and slap a freight guard on. And again, it's a misunderstanding. Maybe it's not the cleanest operation, but it's certainly not fraudulent. It's certainly not engaging in double brokering, which is a especially serious allegation in the carrier business. So, you know, I've handled the case where I got involved in behalf of a carrier who got tagged with double brokering, and just luckily was able to resolve it pretty quickly just through some phone calls and correspondence. A cease and desist from me got the broker's attention, and I explained the situation to them. So that was one. Another situation where there was a mistaken assumption of double brokering had to do actually with a couple of sister companies. One was owned by the husband, one was owned by the wife. They had two different names on the trucks, but the husband's company actually owned the wife's truck, but had not had the chance to put the new decals on. So again, if you book with carrier A and then carrier B shows up to pick up your freight, broker will think double brokering. And then when they tried to figure out the situation, the carrier, his English was not his first language, so there was definitely a language barrier that I was actually able to step in and help resolve and explain everything to the broker, who ended up taking down the freight guard without us having to resort to litigation.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a perfect segue into my next question, but just my 2 cents on both those stories.
Yeah.
There was a huge LinkedIn debate and problem going on. This was like a really, really long time ago, where somebody was using their personal cell phone, and they were a dispatch service for, you know, multiple owner operators, and they were just using their personal cell phone for calling on all the freight to book all of these trucks. And so that's basically, you know, their work phone, but they're a dispatch service. And every broker kept telling them, like, you're not allowed to have the same phone number for multiple MCs. And they were trying to explain to the brokers that, like, this is just my work phone for this, like, I'm a dispatch service. And every MC that I book the truck with you that's the truck that's going to show up. And they were all telling him, like, no, you're not allowed to do this. You have to have a separate phone for every MC number. And
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, it might not be the cleanest operation, but it's far from illegal and it's far from fraudulent.
Right.
To only
Exactly.
own one cell phone, you know. So
Right. Right. Exactly.
but that does segue us into the next question. So you do speak Russian and you are fluent in Russian. So that's how you solved that one FreightGuard.
Yeah, that definitely helps. Yeah, I'm fluent in Russian. I was born there and moved to the U.S. with my family when I was in second grade, but I still retain the language, and it actually really helps. I've encountered a lot of people in the carrier industry where English is not their first language, and they happen to be from one of the former Soviet republics, so they're a lot more comfortable speaking in Russian, and I think that really helps me figure out what the issue is, as well as build a rapport with them right away and kind of establish a really trust, basically. So, you know, it's one of those things that I've always had, and it's definitely come in handy as I've gotten into this this carrier 411 FreightGuard attorney niche.
Yeah, I mean, I think Russian is definitely, you know, it's a huge trucking language. You know, you got Russian, you know, a couple of the Slavic languages, and Spanish. I mean, that's kind of the main secondary languages in the logistics industry. So I can definitely see how that would help you out in this type of business.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, are there any misconceptions about what carriers can and can't do when it comes to dealing with getting a freight guard? Because I mean, I've heard several times. I mean, me and you spoke about this previously, but
Yeah.
I've heard several times carriers want to go and start suing Carrier 411 directly, and I was told that that's not really an option. So, like, what are some misconceptions and maybe some do's or don'ts when it comes to responding to freight guards?
Yeah, that's a big one. You mentioned Carrier 411 as being the target of the lawsuit. That's basically the ire and the frustration a lot of the time is directed at Carrier 411 as much as it is at the posting broker. The problem with going after Carrier 411 is, I mean, they're a forum. They're a website that allows carriers to post reviews, or brokers to post reviews of carriers on their website. And while I'll say they could probably be a little bit more diligent about what they allow and what they don't allow, at the end of the day, they're a forum, no different from Facebook or Google or Twitter. So
Yeah, I like that analogy because that was the analogy you kind of explained it to me, and that's kind of the analogy that got me to understand it, that it's not really a legal thing, because it's the same as a Facebook post, it's the same as, you know, a Twitter post. You know, this isn't like a legal organization. This is literally a website, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you go out tomorrow and post that Dan Artaev is a great attorney, but he steals from orphans on Facebook, I'm not gonna go after Facebook and be like, take this down, it's illegal. I'm gonna go after you because you're the speaking party. So, yeah, and there's also there's a federal law called Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act that basically protects forums like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Carrier 411, at least according to Carrier 411's lawyers, from liability for what people post on their platforms. And, you know, just a quick aside, that case went up, that section was before the Supreme Court last year, and the Supreme Court basically left it alone. So it's a big roadblock to going after a forum like Carrier 401. So what we have to do is target the broker. We directly speak with the posting party.
Yeah, because I mean, like you just said, there has to be some type of laws in place, because I mean, you can't just go suing these huge mega companies like Instagram, all these companies, for what their users are posting. I mean, there has to be moderation, But in Carrier 411's example, it's not like there's people going out there and saying very, very inappropriate things. These are just business disputes, like small claims court type of things, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, again, it depends on who you ask. I've seen some really bizarre posts to Carrier 411, some bizarre freight guards, but yeah, at the end of the day, what I always have to explain to carriers is we have to target the broker, and they're the ones who would be on the hook for defamation and potentially some other claims.
Yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, I think that's something carriers need to start to understand, is that Carrier 411 is just a website, and it's not on them in most situations, like, to deal with these things, these disputes. I mean, if you ask me, my personal opinion, I think there should be a little bit more moderation, or there should be a better dispute system internally in the website. But that's, you know, that's comparing apples and oranges here, because at the same time, as we just said, they do have the freedom of saying, hey, you know what, we don't know what's going on.
Right.